regularly scheduled January 18th, 2021 City Council meeting. As you come in, there's a sign-in sheet on your desk over there. If you're visiting with us tonight, would you please sign your name? Okay, please have a roll call vote. Deputy City Clerk, Loren.
Mayor Stockford.
Here.
Councilmember Soha.
Present.
Reiner.
Here.
Here. Morrissey.
Here.
Sharp. Here. Stuccio.
Here.
Pratt.
Here.
And Zeiser.
Here.
Absent is Councilmember Beer.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. We'll move on to approval of agenda items. Does the city manager or any member of council have any changes they'd like to make to the agenda tonight? Mr. Lance Lashaway, member of our TIFA board and a downtown businessman, he asked me if I would read this letter for him. I think I will read it during, since it pertains to the Carson Cooley letter and communications petitions. I think I'll read it at that time, but I don't really feel like we need an amendment to the agenda to do that. So is that okay with you guys? Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move. Second.
Motion on the floor from Councilman Morrissey, seconded by Councilman Soha. May please have a roll call vote, Deputy Clerk.
Councilmember Reiner.
Yes.
Beer. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Morrissey.
Yes.
Sharp.
Yes.
Stuccio.
Yes.
Pratt.
Yes.
Zeiser.
Yes.
Mayor Stockford.
Yes.
And Councilmember Soha.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll move on to the consent, we'll move on to public comment on agenda items only. During this time, the podium will be open. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Please limit your trips to one to the podium. Please ensure that whatever you speak out at this moment, that it has a direct tie to something that's present on the agenda tonight. Podium is now open.
Reverend Dennis Wayne Scott, Universal Celtic Ministries here in Hillsdale. I had a couple of things I wanted to say, and Greg and Rob, went to Washington D.C. as we all know, as it also says in the letter. And Greg and I have had a few disagreements, but when it comes to patriotism and standing up for what's right, I want to commend these two gentlemen. They had taken their patriotism to the fullest. They took their children to see how a protest would be, a peaceful protest, not one of violence and that. And I think that what they did is a very patriotic thing for our city, for our country, and for each and every one of us that stands here. We need more people that will stand up for the things that are right, for the things that are true and justice, and what is right before God's eyes, not man's. We don't find favoritism through the eyes of man. We find favoritism through the eyes of God. And the Bible leads us and tells us that we need to make a stand. And if we're going to make a stand, we need to stand upon the true rock. And that true rock is Jesus Christ. And when we turn around and we go through the things that they went through, knowing that there was setups, that there was protests, people there to create problems, which at the time that they went, there was not anything like that was supposed to happen. But, I want to give my salute to both of them for their patronage and for standing up for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Any more public comment?
John Rutan. I'm sorry, I could do a 2-hour dissertation on this whole thing, so I'll try to be brief. George Washington said our foreign policy should be that we are friendly to everyone, but no one's friend. And I try to follow that in my daily life. There's people on this board that I don't agree with, that Greg himself at one time called me his enemy. I'm all right with that. I'm okay. But I'm not going to let personality conflicts interfere with what's right and what's wrong. Madison said in Federalist 51 that government is the end of justice, It's the end of a civil society. And we should be civil. And everybody that went there that I was with, we went there to be civil. There was no crystal ball. We didn't know that there was going to be agents provocateur there. So let's look at a couple of things. Jefferson said that we have the right to practice our rights. He was talking specifically about religion. As long as the practice of our rights don't violate someone else's life, liberty, or property. Those are pretty simple things to live by. If I have the right to a Second Amendment, if I use that Second Amendment properly, with rights come responsibilities. If I do that properly, then I can continue to use my rights. If I don't use those rights properly, then I'm held responsible in the way in which I did those rights. First Amendment, free speech should be the same. If we use our First Amendment right and we don't violate someone's life, liberty, or property, then we should have that. Now, one of the problems that we have is we know that the political speech has the highest privilege in the First Amendment. And for too long, we've been pushing that a little bit too hard. And what happens is, I don't know if you guys are sick of it, but I'm really sick of the political rhetoric because it takes us away from being a civil society. And shouldn't the exercise of your First Amendment right also be held with the same responsibility? So thereby, I was there. This is a first-hand account. Neither one of these gentlemen acted in any way in which they committed a crime. For God's sakes, they took their daughters with them. And both of those men had laid their lives down to protect them. They would never put them in a dangerous situation. I took my daughter with me. I would never take my daughter into a situation that I thought would be violent. Never once did I witness anybody that was with us do anything violent to property or to person. So, my problem comes in the last part of the letter that says their intention. They went there to cause insurrection. Let me remind you of the 14th Amendment, Section 3. Both of them took an oath to the Constitution. And if they did that, insurrection to the government or overthrow of the government is a felony. So what's going on is someone is accusing them of a felony. It is not an opinion. I can have an opinion, and I have the right to that opinion. But when I start accusing people of committing felonies that I can't prove, then there needs to be some responsibility in the way in which we exercise our First Amendment right. So, to end, I'm here in support of their actions. I witnessed it firsthand. I myself did not go for any insurrection or to overthrow the government or to get them to change the vote in any way. I went there to exercise my First Amendment right to petition my government for redress and asking for an investigation on the election itself. That is it. So in closing, I stand in support of both Robert and Greg.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Any more public comment?
Hey, Adam. Hey, Board. Well, we're ushering in a neoconservatism, globalist government with an atheistic point of view this week. Build Back Better. How about the Great Reset? For the last 32 years, the only time I've witnessed national government not in a state of neoconservatism was during the Trump years. Boy, did liberals and neocons cry, kick, scream the whole time. In my opinion, Trump has plenty of flaws. On paper, he's a moderate Democrat and runs as a conservative Republican. How come so many Republicans like Trump? That's because there's plenty of space and patience for moderate Democrats and conservative Republicans. What is not accepted by both is the party of hypocrisy, lies, deceit, cronyism, and corruption. And in my opinion, again, the far left, what I call liberals, and the far right, what I call neocons, are destroying our political names, nation, community from within. Rhinos condone and do nothing to stop it. And they're just as guilty by association. Both neocons and rhinos will even use religion as a tool to act immoral. When is it time to call a spade a spade? Unfortunately for the common citizen, Most people that align with liberals, rhinos, and neocons tend to run for political office and grab power within institutions related, such as court systems, law enforcement, schools, and unions. Yes, the overwhelming majority of Hillsdale County political system from township forward meet these terms, in my opinion. Liberals, rhinos, and neocons all have indoctrinated local government with their own forms of propaganda and education, such as the Michigan Township Association, known as the MTA, or with fear of abuse by judicial systems. For many years, these immoral tactics have been taught and expected as the norm. This has filtered to the citizens at their expense. A good example is what we witnessed in 2020. The state has done tremendous amount of overreach, yet majority of our local, county, state, and national government have been politically and personally silent. Another overreach is blight ordinances. Of course, it's very local, but it's taught by agencies that have allegiance to the state, such as the MTA. As the main organizer of the Hillsdale County Republican Party stopped the steel trip to DC, I was able to organize 2 charter buses, 104 people, $12,400 in 4 days. We all went for a common cause. Election fraud did take place, and we want our heads to be counted among the masses attending. We want it to be seen. Not one of us wore a helmet, not one carried a weapon, not one of us acted in a violent manner, period. In fact, while I was on the front line with thousands of people around me, I didn't witness a Trump supporter act violent. To be fair, my friend that did attend, he was on the opposite side of me. He witnessed a guy trying to break out a window. A lot of people around there were yelling that was Antifa. Trump supporters grabbed the Antifa member and grabbed the hammer or the club or whatever it was from him that was trying to break out that window. You can watch it online. Regardless of the national media reports, you'll be challenged to find actual footage of violence. Yes, there was one unarmed female murdered in the act of breaking a door window and attempting to crawl through. But does this honestly represent 1 million people? In fact, does it even call for her to be shot? For the 104 people, we witnessed no fires, no arrests, no attacks, no fights from a single Trump supporter. With 1 million people believing the election was stolen, in my opinion, we showed great restraint. Compared to what DC looked like several weeks priorhand, hypocrisy has to be the word of the year. Council members Robert Sosha and Greg Stuchel and TIFA board member Lance Lashaway, along with 49 other Hillsdale County people, went to DC as true patriots representing our community. We took our money, time, and energy to endure unexpected below freezing temperatures to come home to a national media lie. Fortunately for Hillsdale County and those who attended, we have a lot of witnesses, pictures, and video content. We were able to control the mainstream narrative in our community, something that is not common and very difficult to do. National media nor local liberals in Hillsdale County get to control the narrative here, or what happened in DC or on the 6th. Both groups have lost all respect and credibility from the majority here. I just have zero issues calling a spade, and neither should you. In closing, join me. Join the conservative, like-minded patriots. Get with the Hillsdale County Republican Party, and let's flush out liberals, rhinos, and neocons together, and let's grow our conservative movement. Let's take back our Republican name. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any more public comment?
Penny Swan, Ward 4. My public comment tonight is about the letter to request the resignation of Robert Soha, Greg Stuchel, and Lance Lashaway on the TIFA board. All for going to Washington, D.C. in support of President Trump on January 6th. Americans have constitutional rights. These men were well within their constitutional rights. Everybody has constitutional rights, whether you're a homeless person or an elected official. All Americans have constitutional rights. This country has gotten so far away from standing up for all citizens' rights and doing the constitutional thing, whether you agree with them or not. And look where we're at. All of us on boards and you on council have taken an oath to uphold the United States Constitution and the Constitution of Michigan. How many have read both those documents? A little side note to this letter, and it's being posted on social media by me on my political page. The author of the letter, Carson Cooley, reached out to me shortly after it was posted and asked me if I would kindly black out one of the names. I asked him if the individual was going to retract his statement and regretted signing the letter. He said no. he just didn't want it public. I said, I'm really sorry, but then I can't black out his name. It's a public document. It's going in the packet for Monday night's meeting. It was posted on social media on Carson's page, and that's where somebody got it and sent it to me. So I found it wrong to erase somebody's name. It's a public document. There are consequences to written words to a public body asking for people to resign or being removed. I find it ironic that individuals are asking for Lance, Robert, and Greg's removal or resignation from council and a board, not knowing that this sort of document is public. How many of these folks who wrote and signed the letter have read both the Constitution and know how government works? Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. Any more public comment?
Carson Cooley, Ward 3. Good evening. My name is Carson Cooley, and I have seen that I've been a little bit more famous tonight. I am the author of the resignation letter recommending that Councilman Socha, Councilman Stuchel, and TIFA board member Lashley resign. I would like to begin. I will respond to that comment. I did ask Penny to remove the name from that letter after being reached out to Michael. He wanted his name off the letter, and he didn't realize the consequences. I didn't fully understand why he didn't realize this was a public letter, but I respected his wishes and reached out to Penny privately, but she decided not to, and I respect her decision. First of all, as well, I would like to thank the mayor and city council on discussing this matter in which I wrote the letter. I would like to make a few things clear before this discussion. This is not a demand, this is a recommendation. A recommendation of around 30 concerned residents who believe that the officials' participation on the 6th was irresponsible, and we were disgusted by the lack of acknowledgement or denouncement of the violence that took place that day. It is not their right to protest that we question here today, it is their judgment. Their judgment to get on a bus and go to a wild event to take America back. Their judgment to stay, as other Hillsdale residents recall, when domestic terrorists were entering the Capitol building. Their judgment not to write a statement condemning the violence on the bus ride home, but waiting over a week to do so. These judgments were highly irresponsible to make, especially as they were there representing our city government. To be clear, I have no reason to believe that these officials participated in any violence. What I do know, however, is they attended an event to silence the voices of 81 million Americans, including 6,000 voters here in this county, and to pressure politicians in Washington to go against our constitutional republic. This event later turned violent, and we didn't hear any sort of denouncement from the officials until over a week after. It may sound like I'm repeating myself, but 5 people didn't come home to their families that evening, and our officials were silent. January the 6th will go down in history as the worst domestic attack on our republic in our nation's history. Hundreds of voices echoing through the nation's capital while thousands cheer from the outside. It went exactly as advertised. It was wild. Martin Luther King Jr., a golden light of our democracy, once said, "The time is always right to do what is right." I believe the right thing for these officials to do is resign, as I believe their lapse in judgment in attending this protest was far too high. However, at the end of the day, it is their personal decision for the officials to do as they wish. But I hope they consider what I said today and what I said in my letter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carson. Any more public comment?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Cooley. I'm a resident of Ward 3, and I'm Carson's father. I'd like to elaborate a little bit on why I feel that it was a bad idea for any elected official to travel to Washington, D.C. on January 6th to attend the Stop the Steal rally. First and foremost is that the goal of this event was to disrupt the counting of the electoral ballots in Congress. Even if you had no intention of actively participating in the disruption of the count, just being there in support of that cause is concerning, to say the least. By this point in time, after numerous recounts, audits, and failed lawsuits, all 50 states had certified the results of their elections. We had reached the point of things simply being a formality. the election was over. Any attempt to disrupt or interfere with the counting of the electoral ballots is, in my opinion, un-American and should have consequences. Secondly, I feel that there was enough indications of violence in the days and weeks prior that it was reasonable to expect violence that day. The event had been promoted with the phrase, "Take America Back." I only know of one non-violent way to take America back, and that's at the ballot box, exactly how 81 million of us did on November 3rd. We also heard the phrase, "Be there, DC will be wild." Now, there's been a lot of discussion about that particular word, wild. So I turned to Webster and found 3 definitions that fit in this case. Number 1, not subject to restraint or regulation. Number 2, marked by turbulent agitation. Number 3, going beyond normal or conventional bounds. Applying any of those definitions shows that this was never intended to be a normal, peaceful protest. I think it's important to remember that you are elected officials and people are going to hold you to a higher standard. It seems reasonable to expect any elected official that was in attendance to immediately denounce the violence that took place. I'd also like to mention that what some people call cancel culture, we call accountability. It's our responsibility as citizens to hold our elected officials accountable, and we will continue to do just that. Finally, as today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I'd like to finish with a quote from Dr. King that I think applies just as much today as it did when he said it. We still have a choice today: nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. This may well be mankind's last chance to choose between chaos and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any more public comment? Yes, anyone virtually attending is welcome to make public comment. Just step on up to the invisible podium in front of you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is Kimberly Rafferty, and I'm going to apologize. This is my first meeting, so I did not write out a very well letter like you guys did, so that's my inexperience. But I signed the letter, and the reason I signed the letter is simple. An insurrection took place at our Capitol. It was an attempt to stop our democracy. It was billed as Stop the Steal. And rather than leave and condemn the actions that took place at our Capitol, our representatives that were there came back, threw out conspiracy theory, blamed the violence on other groups, and didn't come out and say it was wrong, that it should have never happened. And it was a very dark day in our country, and I don't believe anyone who represents Hillsdale County should be aligned with that. So, that is all. And I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. Just things happened and I couldn't be there. Thank you all for, that's it.
Thank you, Kimberly. Any more public comment? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the virtual and the in-person podium and move on in the agenda. To the consent agenda, we've got approval of bills, city and BPU claims of December 23rd, which would be last year, of course. Payroll December 24th. We got city council minutes of January 4th and finance committee minutes of both November 30th, December 14th, and December 28th. Any discussion on the items in the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Councilman Morrissey, seconded by Councilwoman Pratt. May I please have a roll call vote, city clerk?
Councilmember Morrissey?
Yes.
Sharp?
Yes.
Stuchel?
Yes.
Pratt?
Yes.
Sizer?
Yes.
Mayor Stockberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Soha?
Yes.
And Councilmember Briner.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll move on to communication petitions. Item number one is, item number A is airport fuel sales. As you can see, there's a chart on here. It's in the council minutes. And now it looks like, and Dave, you're welcome to add to this, and Ginger, I see you're online, you're welcome to add to this too. It looks like our sales, were down a little bit this year, which I guess understanding considering. But we're definitely moving in the right direction. So this is something to really be proud of. Is there anything to add, Dave or Ginger?
Mayor, I would just say that, given the year and the restrictions on flying and commerce, as you can see with the numbers, they might have been down from the last 2 years, but prior to that, 3 years ago, we greatly have exceeded that. Also wanted to note that we are finishing up our new fuel farm that they're currently working on, which will allow us to actually sell more fuel and have more fuel on hand for the increase in traffic that we've seen at our airport in the last few years. So, Ginger, is there anything you would like to say?
Are you with us, Ginger? Okay.
I guess not.
All right, well, any discussion, council members? Councilman Brenner.
Yeah, I just want to thank Ginger for all the hard work that she does out there, and then also a little bit more information. The Exchange Club didn't do the annual fly-in this year, which that's probably a little bit of the cause of the down. But hopefully this year we'll be good to go, and the airport will be up above the 2019 numbers. But Ginger does a wonderful job out there. Anybody that I've talked to, anybody that flies in or out, praise her and let everybody know that she does a wonderful job. So thank you, Ginger.
Thank you, Councilman Brenner, and she's definitely a fantastic face for the airport. So, any more council discussion on this item? Okay, we will move into item B, which is a thank you letter from Community Action Agency. It's addressed to Kim in the assessing department, and it's a thank you letter expressing their gratitude for the support of the Adopt a Family program during the 2020 holiday season. So, thank you, Kim, and thank you, Community Action Agency. Anybody have anything to add to this? Okay, we'll move on to item C. And I'll do item C and item D together. Carson Cooley letter and Beverly Hines form submission because it's concerning the same thing. I didn't know. Did you want me to read your letter, Carson?
I feel like a lot of people have read it already, but if you would like to, I respect that.
Okay, it doesn't matter. I'll just sum it up. It's basically everybody said it at the podium.
Then Lance had his also, you added.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to do that here.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Carson penned a letter with 30 signatures of Hillsdale residents, also Beverly Hines. It used our online forum to send us mail. When you drive, and just to sum it up, she says, when you drive the car that drops off a person that murders someone, you are charged as an accomplice. It's not necessarily true.
Not true. That's, yeah. There's bad legal theory at play here.
With the exception, including this letter of 30 people and this email, I can say I probably had a dozen other messages from people. A few of them who signed the letter also, some of them that didn't, that either asked for the forced removal of Councilman Stuchel, Councilman Philhott, or asked me to ask them to resign. So I wanted to, first of all, make it clear to people that there is a charter, there is a way in the charter to remove council members. I don't think it's ever been exercised in the city of Hillsdale. And I think in all cases you would
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say my public remarks have been published in the Hillsdale Daily News and online. I'm not going to rehash those, but there were so many irregularities on the evening of November 3rd into the morning of November 4th that demands our government look into it, and whether Biden would have legitimately prevailed and the Harris ticket would have legitimately prevailed, or Trump would have retained his office after that investigation, I would have been settled with that. But our government failed at every level to look into these irregularities. And to deny that there were irregularities is dishonest at best. I am proud that the foundation of our civil government allows me the right to voice my opinion whether you disagree with it or not, whether it's politically correct or not, and speak it loudly and boldly as I please. It's a protected right. And if it offends you, I do not apologize for that. If it angers you, I do not apologize for that. Because I was given by God the right to go and petition my government for a redress of grievances, and I am grieved at the lack of moral authority that our elected officials have showed in these past 10 or 12 weeks. It should upset all of us as American citizens to believe that a man who received 220 counties less victories than President Obama received when he won 67 million votes in 2008, it's very difficult for me to believe that 400 and some odd counties was able to produce 80 million votes. It's a stretch. If it happened and the process was legitimate and verified, so be it. I would live with that result. But for the officials in Wayne County to put up dry boards and cover the windows so people couldn't observe the process, that's troubling. For the officials in Pennsylvania to change the rules on the eve of the election without going through the legislative process, that's troubling. For the shenanigans in, I can't think of the county in Georgia right now that happened, that's troubling. For election in Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, for counting to stop at 11 and then start back up at 3, and for the curves to have been at one level and then all of a sudden the roles reverse, and instead of the Trump-Pence ticket having the lead, the Biden-Harris ticket has the lead, and then the curves are the same. Those irregularities are troubling. And I have a right as an American citizen to be able to trust that the things that are produced in the seat of government in our republic are trustworthy. And I don't. And I went to Washington, D.C., and I took my 15-year-old daughter because I wanted her to understand that we have a voice, and our voices can be heard, however small. And in that throng of hundreds of thousands of people, we could yell and scream, nobody could hear us. But we were there showing solidarity and support for the constitutional process. The process which you say I abandoned or I betrayed, I reject that notion. And I ask you to reject or retract your statement in light that John Sullivan has been arrested by the FBI, and the affidavit suggests that he was the leader and instigator of the breach of the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. He is a known member of Antifa, and he was shown on camera, and it is in the sworn affidavit by the FBI that he was one of the instigators of the breach and probably helped lead to the assassination of the young woman inside the Capitol. With that information, justice demands that you rethink the letter you sent. It is irresponsible to demand somebody to resign because they exercise their First Amendment rights. I would encourage you, as Penny Swan said, to read that Constitution that we are under and understand the foundation and bedrock of our liberty is the right for us to speak our voice and to say it loud and clear. And our culture is trying to remove that from the equation and steal that right from each and every one of us. And it is imperative that we stand strong and bold and courageous to speak the truth as we know it. Or this government of the people, by the people, and for the people will perish from the earth. And our children's children will hear us say, remember the America that once was free? I don't want to say that to our children's children. I want to say I fought for truth and justice, and I will continue to fight for her. Long may that banner wave. I thank you in one respect, because you have steeled my resolve that a government of the people and by the people and for the people is worth the blood and the sacrifice of the patriots that went before me and the patriots that will come behind me. And when I was standing on that mall and my feet got cold because of the dew on the grass and the wind coming off of the river, and I started to cry, and not cry, but whine and complain about my cold and achy feet, until I remembered that on Christmas Eve of 1776, George Washington took a dramatic, bold step and crossed the Delaware. And I remembered that the blood-stained feet of the men who fought alongside stained the snow as they marched to engage the enemy. And I thought to myself, and I was ashamed that I would cry and complain about cold toes on a day when I'm exercising my constitutional rights, when those men bled and died on the battlefields of the Revolution so that we can exercise our rights. You, young man, I appreciate your passion and your boldness, but you would do well to truly understand the foundations and the institutions that serve you well. And sir, I appreciate you upholding your son. I admire that. But at the same token, I'm a free man able to exercise my free rights. I will serve this community well, as I've been elected to do. I will uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, and I won't apologize for it. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement, Councilman Soha. Any discussion at the council table about it? Councilman Stucci, would you like to say anything?
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna, that was beautifully said, Rob. Beautifully said. I echo every word he said. And really all I was really gonna say was, you know, I think we all agree that rushing the Capitol building was wrong. We all agree with that. But also wrong is a general condemnation that everybody there was part of that. That's a wrong statement as well. And, you know, if you believe burning and looting is the way to solve these problems, whether you're MAGA or whether you're Black Lives Matter, that is dangerously wrong. And if you don't, and if you actually believe that people should be silenced, as Rob stated, for exercising their First Amendment right, if you believe that, you are dangerously wrong. And I just want the community to know that I was planning on going back to Washington, D.C. for the Right to Life March, but that was canceled. And I will be taking a group of youth, my wife and I, to Lansing for the Right to Life March. So again, I'll be exercising my First Amendment rights for the slaughter of the innocent. That's really it. And I will not apologize, and I will not step down from council. But well said, Rob. Well said.
Thank you, Councilman.
Well, I appreciate you gentlemen's understanding of history and appreciate that you guys take it over your own constitution. And I would disagree. Mr. Cooley said that what happened in Washington was the worst attack ever on our republic.
It's not the worst attack this year on our republic.
I would submit that was the
Month.
Battle of First Manassas
Yeah.
that started.
Oklahoma City bombing. Yeah.
Thank you, buddy. We'll have another public comment at the end of the meeting. Councilman Sasser.
I shouldn't even wade into this because I always get myself in trouble with my own big mouth. But I mean, that said, I do appreciate the people who are here on both sides of this issue. One thing that we gripe about, I think rightly so, is that we don't get a lot of civic participation. So it's actually refreshing, and it makes it less boring to see people vigorously debate something. That said, it does make me sad that we're so uncomfortable with the speech of others, whatever side they come in on. I myself am kind of getting annoyed at this rhetorical tactic where when something terrible happens, people on the other side of the issue try and relate people who have nothing to do with it to that issue, so that, in other words, in this instance, Greg and Rob and Lance are forced to say their names and some violence that had nothing to do with them in the same sentence. In some ways, I think resounding silence might have been a good way to greet this, but I do like the back and forth. I will say some of the substance of the argument. The word wild, much was made, I think, on both sides of the word wild. There's a restaurant called Buffalo Wild Wings. I've been there myself, if the FBI has any interest in the matter. Should I assume, due to the use of the wild word, right, that's now a dark word in American history, that this is not an ordinary nonviolent restaurant? No, of course not. We do have firm definitions for words like insurrection, however, though, right? There's a certain, that's not only a moral, but also a legal word to be used. I mean, you could be hanged, I believe, for insurrection in this country. And maybe the people who stormed the Capitol did satisfy that bar. I don't know. But people using their speech and being mildly physically proximal to those people, that does not rise to the level of insurrection, which as far as I know, has something like a minimum of 20 years federal imprisonment. So I just think that we need to be careful. There's a hot political temper. I would, and I have said the same about Antifa not being the same as people who participated in the Black Lives Matter movement. I think everybody should be allowed to exercise their civic voice, and we shouldn't use the violent fringe to try and discredit everyone, as uncomfortable as we may be with their speech. I also want to caution, obviously in many respects, Martin Luther King, Dr. King was a great leader, but if we're throwing around quotes, one that unfortunately was thrown around this summer was he supposedly said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." So when we start thinking in that mentality, well, maybe the people at the Capitol were just whispering back in a language that they were taught can now be used in our civic discourse, and that's why we need to kind of cool off the political temperament, or otherwise people will be having a dialogue in the language of the unheard. And I think we see the start of that.
I would agree with you, Councilman Zeiser. There's a cancer on this nation, for sure. Definitely noticed that the past year, but you can't, everything's all or nothing now. You can't, like Mr. Smith stood up and said, basically, I support Trump, but I also believe he's a moderate Democrat, which essentially he is. But you can't say that anymore. You're either with Trump or you're against Trump. And you can't say that Gretchen Whitmer, that you appreciate some things she's done, like signing that expungement bill, because if you do that, all the people that so firmly against what I think is the cruel and incomprehensible things that she's done during the shutdown. It's just everything is all or nothing. I don't understand how we got to this point, but there's definitely no moderation left in society. We're at a scary place right now, so it's unfortunate. I don't know if things are going to get better, or if we can get it back or not. To me, so. Any more discussion?
Well, to answer your question, Mayor, it starts in small-town America.
Absolutely.
That's where it starts. And this table, everybody at this table, I believe, has had one no vote, one dissenting vote all along. So we're not afraid to have that discussion, that openness. And really the bedrock of our nation is small-town America. So we will rebuild it.
Good point, Councilman Stuchel. Any more discussion? All right. Well, we will move on. We've got no introduction, adoption of ordinances, public hearings tonight. So we'll move into old business, which is our city council goals for 2021. As you guys know, is another big one that, and the chief can attest to this, I'm not trying to put him in a funny situation, but whenever we've looked to cut our budget, police department's always the first place that we always looked at. Police department, fire department. We made cuts there first, and maybe we shouldn't have, but in the past few years, we've made public safety priority, so we've started to build that back up again. Well, we think that there's the opportunity this year to get our patrol officers back up to full capacity. And just speaking at a national level, like the chief had told us last time how difficult it is to find good officers now, something that the residents of Hillsdale appreciate very much is the public safety. They showed us with the millage that it is a priority that we fund patrol officers, that we fund the fire department. So this is something that we're gonna look at this year, and it appeared to me, speaking with council, that this is a priority from everyone. Now, number 4, reestablish the recreation department and its youth programs. Our recreation director, Michelle Wren, is with us tonight, because she's also deputy clerk when we need her. Thank you, Michelle. But this was another item that during the shutdown, it seems like a lot of people were upset about the shutdown of restaurants and businesses, but another thing was a lot of young families that moved to this city to take advantage of our nice little town. They take advantage of the recreation department too. And we all know that when kids are involved in sports, they get into less trouble. So unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown, things that are associated with that, we didn't have our football this year, we didn't have our baseball, and it wasn't good for the kids. They've been in and out of school, locked in the house half the time, so definitely we saw the recreation department get built up over the, okay, so here's some history for some, Bruce knows this because he's been on council for a while, but everybody else wasn't here. Well, at one time, when Michelle was acting city clerk, we had her as city clerk and also the recreation department. Director, she was doing both jobs and she was doing them both part-time, because who could do them both full-time, they're both full-time jobs, you know? And so, when we hired a full-time city clerk, when the position became an appointment instead of an election, then that allowed us to put more resources into what Michelle was doing, allowed her to become a full-time recreation department. And over the couple of years that she did that, we saw the recreation department build up into something that was really something to be proud of. And then this last year just built it all. So
Now she's at the BPU.
yeah, now
Multitasking again.
of course, I've always said that Michelle's our go-to person. She's one of those people that knows how to do everything in the city, and we just appreciate so much what you do, Michelle. We really do. It means the world. It does. But hopefully this year, we have a chance to build that recreation department back up, and people start feeling comfortable with doing this stuff again, and maybe the state will back up a little bit and give us some room to. These are the things that bring young families to the city. These are the things that make it important to live in small communities, is this sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's recreation, but it is absolutely a tax building part of the city. So, then the last item is develop a long-term plan for the Mitchell building. Councilman Stuchel's been working on this. City Manager Mackey's been working on this for a while, and we thought that if we made it a goal at council,
It'd be helpful.
it would be a mandate to get something done with it finally.
Yep.
So we added that to the list, and we all agree that the Mitchell building's a treasure, and we want to preserve it any way that we can. But this year we're going to make it one of our goals. If I know anything about this council and about the city administration, is that we achieve our goals that we have every year so far, and we're going to keep that pattern up. So any discussion on any of these items?
Yeah, number 2, curbside leaf collection. We talked about spending $200,000, I believe it is, on the possibility of a machine. If the funding is there, somehow we can find it, I say go for it. But if it's not, it's something we may have to put on to the next year. This year, we don't know how the state's gonna be as far as funding goes with everything going on. But it should be a priority, but once again, if we have to put it one more year behind, we have to. Streets are number 1.
Streets number 1, absolutely.
And I understand
understand people don't like picking their leaves up. I've been blessed, I only have one tree. My neighbors have many trees and the leaves always come over my yard when everybody picks up their leaves. I do see people bagging leaves. Not very many, but there are. When the COVID hit last spring, people had a lot of time to do yard work, and they did do it. Because they had nothing else they could do at the time. They couldn't go anywhere. So they had no excuse to bag their leaves. So there was plenty of bags out there. But it's not something you want to do. It's not fun.
And we had the Few Good Men, they went out, the college group of Few Good Men, they went out and did a couple hundred houses that they bagged leaves for. So we really appreciated
Wow.
that too. And that's part of the effort too. It isn't the time so much that worries me, Bruce, the time people have to spend. Even though it is time consuming, it's more the elderly people in town and the infirm people in town that don't. They might have the time to do it, but they don't have the resources to buy the bags. They don't have the energy to go out or the physical ability at all to go out and bag their leaves. It really is a labor-intensive process. So
That's a goal could be attained if funding is there.
well, that's why we put it on the goals.
Right, that's one thing we should
goal.
keep,
We're
go
working
for.
towards it.
Go for that, absolutely.
Councilman Morrissey?
And the other thing is, in terms of funding, it might be possible, if there's not enough money to whatever the cost is this year, we could save some money up and do it the following year, that kind of thing. You know, I mean, as long as people need to know that we're working on it and we're advancing toward it, that would be the best, you know, something along those lines. We can always do something like that.
We'll set Public Services Committee on it to work with Jake and Kristen and Dave and, Public Services Committee, I don't remember who's on it. You guys are gonna be,
Yep.
you guys are gonna be busy this year.
No, we got a plan
Top
coming.
two goals are
Yeah.
your items, so,
No, we got a good plan coming.
awesome. Any more discussion on these items? And entertain a motion to accept and approve these goals.
So moved.
Support.
Motion on the floor from Councilman Morrissey, seconded by Councilman Stuchel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we got 2021 goals. Great job, guys and ladies. All right, we'll move into item B, Public Service Department updates. Dave, Jake?
I will take this. So this kind of addresses some of the goals that were mentioned, actually the top two, but given that the Public Service Committee met this past week, we haven't had time to get the minutes done and submitted, so I put this item on there because there's some time-sensitive items that we wanted to bring to the full council what we discussed. The first would be the vacation of the right-of-way that council has considered previously over at the triangle of Vine and Union Street. The Public Service Committee agreed to move forward on that, which will benefit 4 residents, some of which, a couple of the houses which are landlocked. And the city has really no need for the property. There's sidewalk that we have to maintain, we have to mow it, and really it's just excess property. So we are gonna move forward on vacating that right away to those 4 residents, and they have agreed to cover the cost of the survey work. That was one item. The second item, which was brought up to the council previously, about a year ago before COVID hit, was working with Key Opportunity in the creation of a transportation authority. For some of you who don't know how Dial-A-Ride works with the city with Dial-A-Ride works only within the district of the city or the boundary of the city. Key Opportunity works outside the city in some of their areas. Prior to COVID, we were talking about the creation of a transportation authority, which would expand service throughout the county and actually provide for much more funding for that service in the hopes that it would create a better service. So the city would potentially input its assets, the Dial-A-Ride building and buses. Key Opportunity has buses. those would be put into the authority, and then the townships, the city, the different cities within the county would work on this authority all together to create this authority. Again, one, to improve service and also improve the transportation globally through the county. The Public Service Committee has agreed to that we should be working towards this. So wanted to share that with council, that they have agreed that we should move forward on that, as we discussed prior to COVID. The last thing was what we were talking about, our first two goals, which is road funding and leaf collection. And what came out of our discussion, and Greg and Bill, if you can back me up on this, Tony was not there, but Councilman Veer was, him and I spoke prior to the meeting about his thoughts on the matter. What came out of the discussion was to put on the May ballot a road funding and leaf collection millage, which currently through the 3 mills for road funding, we've been basically out of the charter allows the council to approve 3 mills for debt service, and the council has done that over the last 3 years for road projects. And that's what we've been paying for the improvements, Hallett Street, State Street, Fayette Street, all that has been coming out of those 3 mills. But because of the uncertainty of that approval, it sometimes is hard to plan for future projects. So the city engineer and the DPS director and Public Service Committee discussed giving the residents an option on both these items. And the idea would be that there would be a millage. It would be 4.5 mills with a half mill for leaf collection to provide that, and actually increase the amount going to road repair by 1 mill. So it would be 4.5 mil versus the 3 mills that we're currently assessing through the charter process. And that would be for road repair and construction, and leaf collection equipment and operation. That would be to get out and make the case to the residents in the community of what these funds would be used for, roads, as well as the leaf collection equipment that could be used on for multiple purposes within the Public Service Department. That being said, we have looked at some draft language which would need to be addressed at our next meeting. So our May 1st meeting, as the deadline for the May election is February 9th, of getting that language approved. So that being said, Councilman Zeiser, Councilman Stuchel, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just want to emphasize, I've perhaps been harder nosed than some at this table with regards to the 3 mills. I've never quite been comfortable with that mechanism, since the people really don't have a voice on it, and it's kind of convoluted. That's a debt servicing mechanism, so to oversimplify our logic, it's that we're incurring debt by needing to do roads, and I've never liked that, just because of the fungibility of money. So what I favor about this plan is, I'd like to emphasize that A, this gives the option to the people. It would be on the ballot, so they control their own destiny here. B, should this pass, it would be in lieu of the 3 mills. So this would not be in addition to. I know Dave said that, but I just want to emphasize that it would be in place of the 3 mills. So it's really much less of a substantial increase from what people are already paying. Another aspect of it that helped garner my approval is that there will continue to be mechanisms in place for people who absolutely cannot bear the additional burden. I believe that's my piece on it, but I've always been uncomfortable with those 3 mills because I felt that it was, although it was within our rights and duties as a council to do so, this just seems like something that reverts the matter to the people where I feel it should be. And from everything I've seen, the people want us to fix these roads, and I think they can and will make an educated decision on this.
And I'll just add to that, that 4.5 mills, that's really only a 1.5 mil increase, because we're already doing the 3.
Right.
And so that extra 1.5 mil, Bruce, will help go for the leaf collection. So we're taking care of our roads, and we're also getting the leaf collection problem behind us.
And that equipment can be used, I think Jake estimates 10 months out of the year, because the tractor that we're looking at for leaf clearance, as opposed to a vacuum system, which tends to be down more than it works, and you can only use it for the leaf collection period of the year, this modular system could be used for certain light-duty road repair projects. It could be used for snow clearance on the trails and the bike trail and some of the smaller, tighter areas like the Tifa district. So we'd get year-round use out of this. And I think we should commend Councilmember Veer, whose idea it was to put 0.5 mils in the service of this agenda. I think that, the people might go for this because those are 2 things that of all of the things that we do, as Adam likes to say, those are the services that touch everyone. They might not come to a meeting, or they might not make use of the various city services, but everybody wants their leaves collected and their roads not to ruin their cars.
Okay. Been on council since 2007. Number one thing I always kept hearing about, when you're gonna fix these roads. Nobody likes to pay 3 mills, but that's what one of our solutions we came up with was the 3 mills. I respect you and Adams and Matt Bells when you voted against it. Well, you did it. But we did make progress on the roads. Now, I think this is a great idea you're coming up with. We still keep the 3 mills in place. They won't feel that. They're just gonna feel 1.5 more mills. And it does give more bang to the buck to get things done. And I think it's a great idea, and I commend you guys on what you come up with on this. But remember, that's all I've ever heard about. When are we gonna fix these roads? And we are slowly doing it, but we're going at turtle pace right now. We got a lot of roads still out there that are just falling apart. We gotta keep at it, and I hope the voters will support this, one way or the other.
I mean, they're $1 million a mile to fix them.
That's if you do infrastructure.
We're a small, poor city. Turtle's pace is the best we're gonna do.
But we're making progress. We're making progress.
Yeah, we're making progress, absolutely. Councilman Reiner.
So a lot of the concern when talking with people was they are okay with us doing the 3 mills ourselves, but when we take something to the ballot and put it on the ballot, they are hesitant because after they vote that in, then we have the ability to do an additional 3 mills. On that aspect of it, you could potentially have more.
Actually, to answer that question, we would be at about 19.5 mils, and our max is 20. So we could not do the 3 mills on top of it, just to make that clear.
So that would restrict us from tacking on another 3 mills.
That is correct.
Okay, that's good to know and good to get that out there.
Yes.
Because I've had multiple people tell me that they're fine with us doing the 3 mills because we're doing road work and everything like that. But if we were to put it on the ballot, they may be hesitant because of that issue. So it's good that we got that. The other thing too is with the leaf collection, the big thing that we went away from leaf collection was because Eagle was putting in restrictions as far as us hanging on to the leaves and having a compost site. Have we figured out a solution to that problem first before?
Yes, so the equipment that we would be purchasing actually grinds the leaves up and reduces them to a much smaller mass. And Jake has been working with an outside contractor that actually makes mulch out of it, and he is willing to take that material. Jake, I've got you unmuted. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, we have just a couple options to explore, David. You are correct. The thought probably would be to consider taking the material to their facility utilizing their trucks. So that material would never hit the ground in our facility, which would ease us up a lot on the DEP restrictions.
Wow. Well, thank you guys. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know if I support it yet, but I will say, geez,
I do have one.
both the top two goals
No.
in one fell swoop. Go ahead.
People are gonna wanna make sure that those 4.5 mils are going for just that and nothing else. The city can't say, well, we're gonna shift it over here because we need money somewhere else.
Well, it would be
It has to be
dedicated millage.
Yeah,
right?
and it will
It's
be
gotta be dedicated.
denoted in the millage language that it will be only for road repair and construction and leaf collection equipment and operation. And the idea was that of the 4.5 mils, a half mil would be earmarked for the leaf collection and internally, and then 4 mils would be for streets.
I mean, if I may, if anything, we'd be in a better position with regards to potential mission drift than we are now, because the existing mechanism by law, the 3 mills that we're levying now, are for the servicing of debts, and that's in part why I've never been as comfortable with it. I've never begrudged you the money. I think that the proof is in the pudding. I mean, we've gotten results. I would have kept voting against it anyway, just as a matter of principle, and as I always say, to kind of remind everyone that it's a grave responsibility of the public trust, and we're punching people in the wallets. But this actually, as a matter of law, would constrain us from not using the money on roads in ways that I personally would feel much more comfortable with.
Now, at the last meeting, we were discussing the possibility of special assessments for neighborhoods that are like way far
Mhm.
down on the priority list, but who are still willing to shell out the money. Does this eliminate that as an option? Are we still gonna, as far as street reconstruction goes, are we still gonna move forward with trying to specially assess some neighborhoods who want to go down that avenue?
The plan that we discussed, and that would get us the most bang for our buck, would be specially assessing, and what the idea would be is that it would be 50% of the road and curbing, gutter, sidewalk cost, with a cap on that. We're still working on that actual plan language. The city engineer's working on that. But this would also include special assessments so that we could get more done quicker. And actually, as special assessments were paid back, that would be set aside for road repair and construction as well, much like we did with the sidewalk. Sidewalks, when we were special assessing those, that went into a special account, and then that account was used to do more sidewalks. So it kind of creates a snowball effect. And the idea would be that we would parlay the two to get as much road repair and reconstruction done as we can in the upcoming years.
I'm glad to see that a solution seems to have been found to the issue of disposing of the leaves once they're collected. There had to be some sort of solution to this because we live in the northern part of North America, and there are thousands of municipalities that have this problem of leaf collection. So I just couldn't believe that we couldn't solve it, and I'm glad a solution has in fact been found.
Any more discussion?
So the 3 mil, just so I understand, as Councilman Briner pointed out, that we're assessing presently, if the 4.5 passes through the popular vote, then we could, for the servicing of debt, which that is new information for me. I didn't understand that provision.
It's a sinking fund for the servicing of debts.
So, nevertheless, we would still theoretically be able to apportion a $0.5 mil.
Theoretically, if it failed at the ballot, we would have to room between what we're currently millaging and what the, like Dave said, the maximum allowed mill is 20. So theoretically, yeah, we would still have that option at our fingertips.
Right.
And my political assumption is that should it fail, I assume that you guys will bring back the 3 mills, and then I'll vote against it, and Adam will vote against it, and I still won't begrudge you the money, but I think that the principle will be the same for me, but my assumption is that this might have a very good chance of passing. Things that Adam, you've pointed out, that this political wisdom, that locally, things that are popular issues, you know, people tend to like the fire department, so things pass with the fire department. People have really made it a priority, the voters have made it a priority to resume the leaf service and fix the roads. We all keep saying that, so I think this one has a fighting chance. This is something that will affect everyone, that everyone will see benefit out of.
It's always best to go to the people.
Yeah.
When you want to spend their money more than you're currently spending.
More than you're currently spending.
You go to the people and ask them for permission. You just don't, that's how I feel too. You just don't take it.
Just make sure you educate the people, though. Gotta educate them. You remember when they tried to pass the road millage thing years back?
That was an income tax, though,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
They tried to pass that.
It's a bad idea.
It was a bad idea,
That's
but
why I voted against
the
it.
politics of that.
I'm not saying I was for it, I'm just saying there was so much rhetoric out there about, oh, this, that. Get the facts out. And I think these gentlemen here are gonna do that. I think they've done that. And that's what we need to do, just keep telling the people this is what's going on. And make sure we don't say, well, that 3 mills, like the question was asked about 3 mills. They have a clear understanding about it. So there's not, oh, they're gonna sneak something behind us. That's not what we're here for.
I certainly wouldn't have been in favor of the plan if I thought that we were going to
Especially
squeeze people,
yeah.
especially for the 3 mills and on top of it. And I found it heartening that this would be an avenue to get rid of the 3 mills.
I just wonder if there's a way for the good people of Hillsdale to voluntarily help in the funding of the roads instead of forcing them through taxation. I don't want to see my taxes increase. Personally, I do want to see the roads fixed. I don't know what the answer is there, but it's just troubling that we have to go to this level, in my opinion.
I don't disagree, but we're talking on the scale of millions, unfortunately, and we've been saddled with decades of neglect. And I think people are still impatient with us even considering the progress that we've made, and I can't blame them. So it really is a devil's bargain. I am not reflexively anti-taxation, but I'm anti-taxation as anybody on the right. I think what I like about this is at least it lets people leave the destiny in their own hands, and if they determine that it is so odious to have the taxes levied upon them, they can vote against it. It's certainly better than us unilaterally doing the 3 mills in my mind.
Oh, I agree with that.
So there's a lot that goes into it, but you know, ultimately you can't draw blood from stone. I mean, I just realistically, and this is not to impugn the civic participation of the people here any more than I already have by saying they don't come to meetings, but we are talking about millions and millions of dollars. As Adam pointed out on the high end, some of those roads where you need to do the full infrastructure, curb, gutter, the sewage lines and sanitary lines under it, you know, $1 million a mile. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that upper portion of Westwood by us, Bruce, would potentially cost in excess of that, and the courts up there.
That's terrible.
And then the other thing is, I mean, at least with the special assessment, we're working on mechanisms where if people didn't want to do that on their street, they could say, take a hike. And there probably will be streets that would say, okay, we'll do ours then. We'll pay for it.
I can think of a couple.
I could think of a couple.
Off the top of my head where the vast majority of the residents over there have been saying for years, just come fix it. We will give you the money for it. What is wrong with you people? We're offering to pay for it ourselves.
And that kind of gives
So I don't have
everyone
a problem
else.
with that at all.
That gives everyone else the opportunity to see, okay, it was quality work. Those people voluntarily did this. They're enjoying the work and they have better roads. Or to say maybe this didn't work out as well, by the way. I like to think that we've learned a lot from some of the projects that stalled, but that's also, again, we wouldn't be in this place if we didn't have 40 years of neglect. And we had 40 years of neglect because, again, as I always say, money's fungible. A dollar can go here, it can go there, and there's very many important causes that. Hopefully not my half.
It's staring at me.
That makes me very uncomfortable.
Live stream's there. It would need to be turned. Chief, I don't know if you can.
It doesn't have to happen right now, just maybe for the next meeting, if we can get somebody up there. Chief, you don't have to do it. I don't want you standing on a chair and falling over. Tomorrow. Yeah, all right, great.
Hello, OSHA.
So that's all. We can move on.
All right, any more discussion? Okay, let's get out of old business and into new business. Item A, VPU sanitary sewer camera services. Chris?
Yeah, so in part of fixing the roads, in which I've heard a lot of discussion tonight, part of that is an evaluation of that sewer system as well. So we have a little over 207,000 feet of pipe that need to be inspected. We don't really know the condition of that. Now, we are into the sewer sometimes and camera, but we've never cambered the whole system. With that being said, also need to evaluate the manholes. So what we did is, as part of our budget last year, and we brought to you guys, and it is budgeted for, the monies would be spent to investigate the sewer system. So as part of this grand plan to fix the roads and the infrastructure, you know, I don't want to get in, or we want to be ahead of the planning and saying that we want to look at this. If the sewer needs replaced, we want to replace it. If we can remediate it, meaning, you know, line it or do something else cheaper, that way we can get more bang for the buck, so be it. But really coming up with that all-encompassing plan to fix the infrastructure and maintain the roads here. So with that being said, we went out to bid. What we recommend is the low bidder, Taplin Group. There may be some concern with that. And what I will say is they're the ones that are in town right now doing our water service potholing, and have done a great job even through the COVID. You know, there was a little bit of shutdown just due to their staffing issues, but we've had no issues with them. From what I understand, there's been no complaints, but from residents. They've done a little over 600 services. So with that being said, we would recommend that bid go to Taplin Group for the amount of $245,344.22, with a contingency of $54,655.78 for the additional pipe cleaning, for a total project cost of $300,000. Now, we do have $330,000 set aside for that. The contingency was just me doing a mathematical subtraction there and saying, hey, we'll go $300,000. With that being said, we don't know what we're going to get into. They may have to do some cleaning, and that's also part of the bid as well. Our crews may not have the time to get out there and get that done, you know, to keep them moving on schedule. What we've asked them to do is, I had that number looked up. I think I want to say 7,000, maybe a little bit more than 7,000 feet of pipe before it's more than 7,000. I'll have to look it up. X amount of pipe before June, and then finishing up next year in the next fiscal year. So a little bit of that will be carried over into next year, but hope to get the whole thing done this summer is really what we're shooting for.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Councilman Salah.
Chris, thank you for your work on this. And I know it's necessary to inspect and clean the pipes. My concern was there's over $500,000 difference between the low and high bids. And I just struggle to see how one company could do something for $500,000 less than the other when both of them, well, the high bid's $780,000, so it's just over $750,000.
Understood. So I think what you'll find here too, not to interrupt, is some of those are out of state. Some of those, this went nationwide, so we had a couple crews that are nationwide that were bidding on this project. I will say Taplin is local. They're from Kalamazoo. This is what they do. They clean the camera. We've got references in here. You know, we called and checked on that, told them, hey, you know, you're substantially less than some of these others. You know, you feel comfortable with that number? And they said absolutely. I think there's a mutual agreement that they like working here as well. And it's close. They don't have to send their crews, you know, across the nation to do other jobs. So
I appreciate that. I like that they're local. that they're a Michigan-based company. I like the cost comparatively. I was just concerned that they might not be able to accomplish the mission. And are there any safety hooks for the city?
There is bid bonds attached to this as well, and like I said, it is stipulated in there a certain amount of feet of pipe being completed by June, in anticipation of them getting it done, through the end of the year.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Director. Entertain a motion to approve the contract with Hopkins.
So moved.
Motion on the floor, Councilman Brenner, seconded by Councilman Sharp. May we please have a roll call vote, City Clerk?
Councilman Sharp?
Yes.
Stuchel?
Yes.
Pratt?
Yes.
Geiser?
Yes.
Mayor Stockford?
Yes.
Councilman Soha?
Yes.
Councilman Briner?
Yes.
And Councilman Morrissey?
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you, Michelle. Move on to item B, Wicket Stick Sewer Use Agreement. Chris?
yeah, so a maintenance agreement was developed by the city attorney for Wicked Stick Development out on Bernard Road. This agreement outlines the terms, Wicked Stick to utilize our sewer system. One highlight that I would like to highlight here is that Wicked Stick has installed all of the infrastructure for this and will maintain that infrastructure. If there's anything wrong with it, we don't have to deal with it. They have attached to our sewer main up on Bernard Street where it ends. So with that being said, we felt that an agreement between the two was necessary in order just to make sure that the T's are crossed and the everything's in order. So.
Councilman Geiser?
Is that agreement transferable in case, the terms of their ownership change or?
There is a paragraph in there that does address that, yes.
Any more questions? Well, thank you, Director Ricardo, for your work on this stuff, and thank you, EPU and Muller. Entertain a motion to approve the Wicket Stick Sanitary Line Maintenance Agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Councilman Soha, seconded by Councilwoman Pratt. May I please have a roll call vote, City Clerk?
Councilman Stuchel?
Yes.
Councilwoman Pratt?
Yes.
Geiser?
Yes.
Mayor Stockford?
Yes.
Councilman Soha?
Yes.
Briner?
Yes.
Morrissey?
Yes.
And Sharp?
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you, Michelle. We've got, we'll move to miscellaneous reports. We've got no proclamations. We got one appointment, which is a reappointment of Travis Skeleton to the AAC. As you can see from his application, Travis has an impressive application. He's been on the airport board for a couple years. He's a pilot. He works out in Jackson. I think he has a business in Jackson now. Anyways, he's been a good member of the board, and I asked that we would reappoint him at this time. Any questions? Motion on the floor from Councilman Browner.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Councilman Browner, seconded by Councilman Soha to reappoint Mr. Stempleton to the AAC. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll move into general public, well, thank you for that appointment, guys, too. Appreciate it. We'll move into general public comment. During this time, same rules apply. The podium will be open as well as the virtual podium. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Please limit your trips to one to the podium. At this time, you may speak on anything you like. Podium is now open.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Ingalls, 20 Vine Street, Hillsdale. Also Hillsdale County Commissioner, District 1. If you do have any questions, please ask tonight or contact me anytime. Just a couple updates. We have had our first organizational meeting. At that time, Mark Wiley was elected chairman, Brad Benzine vice chairman. Committees were distributed as well in that first meeting. My committees are, as chairman, facilities, also IT. So I'll have a busy agenda, as a matter of fact. One of the most recent things I did do is tour the courthouse, the historic courthouse, and a lot of renovations going on there. I mean, it's really quite terrific to renovate that historic building. The goal is to move district court out of the annex and sell that building as soon as we can. Timeline is tough. Projects change and scope has changed. The original project began with the county office building, which has now many of the county offices and departments housed there. The courthouse is becoming a true courthouse with district, probate, and circuit court, as well as the county clerk. So big changes there. Some of the things I've done as commissioner right now is I've attended road commission meetings, parks meetings, tomorrow IT. The orientations are coming fast and furious, and big changes and positive moves, I feel, for our county. Looking for some good collaborative projects. I don't know how the transportation, I don't know about that project, so I'll learn that. But I do know that with the township and the city in collaboration is putting together a rec plan, as is our Parks Department, and Lewis Emery Park is in need. One of the things that is very important to maintain that park is to dredge the ponds. The water level has really diminished, and if we're going to keep those ponds viable, it needs big work. So we'll see how things go, but if there's any city, my district is the city of Hillsdale, so I'm happy to help the best I can. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and we do look forward to working with you in the next 2 years. Any more public comment?
So, John Smith again. I didn't know that common folk had to disavow violence. I thought it was just kind of natural that we all disavow violence. Coming home on the bus that night, none of us slept for a day and a half. So, we were all ready to go to sleep, but we did start seeing reports kind of early on when we got on the bus. I started showing videos of what ABC put out, but I'm going to play, you guys can't see it because it's dark anyways, but I'm going to play this on my phone because this is actually us on the bus because I saw a report from ABC showing what I thought was violence when I first saw it, but it actually is just some like little slapping or pushing. There wasn't really like I said, there was no punches thrown or anything. So, but I'm going to play this.
Can you hold it up to the microphone?
Yep, I will.
So the public can hear you.
Yep.
This bus is all full of Hillsdale people. Did anybody here from Hillsdale call for violence today at the Capitol? No! Not one. Did anybody hear any of the Republican leadership call for it? No! Thank you all.
So that was just an example. I took some notes along the way here. If one thing is correlation of another, then it all never ends. We were there again for stolen elections. In 2020, it was just 2 counties. Now we're down to 6 or more states. It's just getting worse. And to back up what Bill was saying with the wild language, well, I had a wild time at the rodeo this weekend. Yeah, it was a great time. So, we could use language as a tool. The word storming the Capitol was another word. I walked to the Capitol with ice cubes on my feet. So, the word storming. Also, there's been reports of 5 people that lost their lives. 3 people lost their lives to medical conditions like stroke and heart attack. That wasn't because they were beat up or because of anything of that nature. There are the woman that was shot, and supposedly this officer, in the reports from New York Post or New York Times or whatever it was, I can't remember which one it was, but they haven't released why he died. So, and the family asked not to make it political, and here we are making it political. I too took my 16-year-old daughter. I would never put her in harm's way, or at least I wouldn't think that, I wouldn't go into it thinking that. So I also wanted to kind of I've been kind of talking about this a lot lately, and it's about honesty. And I've been talking to Robert about it a little bit, and I talked to you, Adam, about it. And it's hard to be honest, particularly as a politician, in a sense, like, because I know you guys are all talking about this millage, and it's easy to pass that off to the community. I know it is, because you guys are all in positions, or if you guys don't want to lose your seats and stuff like that, and it's easier to let the people steal from one another. If 70% of the people want it and 30% don't, it's easier to let those 70% of people vote over those 30%, and it's no scathing on your guys' backs. I understand that. We got to look at the root cause of this and how we're going to fix it, other than just going straight to millages. I mean, it's easy just to do it. A lot of communities do it. I'm just saying you guys should be looking deeper. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any more public comment?
Penny Swan, Councilman Soha, we ran against each other, had a good campaign. Tonight, I'm very proud of you. Your speech was excellent. I think God put you there for that speech tonight. It was amazing. And I don't need you guys to denounce the violence. Greg and I have had differences, many differences, but I know his heart. Nobody in good conscience would condone that behavior. It's reprehensible. We're all good people here. Death and violence is inappropriate on any level. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Any more public comment? Any virtual public comment? Okay. Seeing no more public comment, we'll close the podium and move into the city manager's report. Dave? I need to use the bathroom over here, this council, and then Marcy.
Yeah, I'm gonna gavel
Step
you
out on
into
your
order.
report, and it'll take you 5 seconds, buddy.
I'll be done.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things wanted to make the council aware of. You know, we had, from a staffing standpoint, we have been dealing with positive COVID infections throughout the staff and through our different departments. We've been dealing with them service-wise, making adjustments to you know, our crews and those type things to keep people separated best we can. We're hoping that, and we've got staff that have been getting the vaccination in the hopes of not getting COVID, or some in substance had COVID and still got the vaccination. So we are dealing with that as a staff, and moving forward with that. Hopefully we are on the downhill slope of that. Just to kind of keep everyone apprised, the construction of the Dawn Theater is moving along very nicely. If you drive by daily, you'll see the full construction trucks as well as the other contractors working on the interior of that. The roof has been completely replaced. The trusses, the roofing material, so it's completely dried in. And again, it's all moving in the right direction for getting done later this year. On the Kiefer House, that project is actually moving forward with the hopes of getting their final funding piece here at the end of the month. I will be communicating with MEDC in anticipation of the Michigan Strategic Fund meeting, where hopefully the project will be approved at the end of the month. So the first meeting in February, hope I have some good news to report to council and to the public that that project, as originally intended, is moving forward. And that would be a great thing for the downtown that's has a number of vacancies at this point for various reasons: retirements, COVID restrictions, closing of businesses, those type things, which we're actively working to try to promote and get back going. And that, wanted to report on the gift card program that EDC, so the Economic Development Corporation, spearheaded. They had a $1,000 $10 boost for gift cards, and the businesses around town actually sold 800 and I believe 46 of them, so almost sold out. And if you look at that from a grand total standpoint, so the customer had spent $25 and they got an extra $10 sponsored through EDC, which gave them a $35 card. So if you look at that, what that parlayed to business or business activity, it was about $30,000. It was over $30,000 for the winter, which, you know, knowing some of our businesses were struggling pretty hard to stay afloat, that's a tremendous effort by our community, by EDC, by council to help promote our local businesses and keep them moving forward. In fact, tomorrow, another grant application is coming out, in which I think actually they can apply for up to $15,000. I think they have a couple days to apply, but it's one of those things where a lot of people apply, so it's best to be in there, you know, right off the bat. And then our Economic Development Partnership of Hillsdale County and our board actually help review those applications countywide. So we're hoping that we'll be able to give more boost to some of our local businesses here in the coming weeks. Tomorrow, in addition on the airport, tomorrow we are receiving bids for our parallel taxiway extension. This was a project, and just to remind council, which was funded through the CARES Act, you know, which was originally passed back in the spring, 100%. So we are we'll be receiving bids and opening them tomorrow to actually start that project later this summer. And that will leave us one more phase of the taxiway, which is where the terminal will be. So that basically is the last phase of the parallel taxiway. And as part of that, the terminal would need to be moved to the new apron at some time in the future. But this, through the CARES Act, again, it's 100% federal funds for this particular project. So we're excited to move forward with that and be wrapping up our fuel farm, new fuel farm. Our spring newsletter will be coming out starting in February for March, talking about the different things for the spring. It's very colorful, and I think the residents will find a lot of good information in this particular newsletter. But last thing I want to mention is the Hillsdale Police Department has received its certification as set forth in the Presidential Executive Order on Safe Policing and Safe Communities, which you remember came out or spun out of the riots that were going on, from the gentleman that was shot up in Minnesota. So this came out of that all police departments would have to be certified in order to apply for Justice Department grant money. And we're pleased to announce that our police department just received notice that the chief's and the staff's application for that certification have been approved, and they are approved. And that's for the next 3 years. So very good for our department and very good for our community. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave?
Could you, what was the police's certification?
Safe policing and safe communities is what it was deemed. It was what President Trump had passed through executive order in regards to certifying the force for excessive force and different things. Chief, do you want to come up and?
It involved an attachment letter about use of force, and we had to send in a bunch of related policies for review to the Michigan
if I would like to add one last thing, because I just want to correct a statement that was made by John. You made a comment about running straight to a millage, and I will say that's inaccurate reflection of what the city has done. I've been here for 5 years, and we have not looked at, a road millage or discussed it in any way over the last 5 years. This, looking at the 3 mills and the good we've done with that, was discussed so that we could plan more solidly in the future, as opposed to not knowing exactly what type of funding we have to fix the roads. So, just wanted to make that comment.
Any more questions for Dave? All right, thank you, Dave. Good report. Okay. Any council members have anything to say? Councilman Zazer.
I think something that links several of the issues we discussed tonight is that in America we have a regime that's predicated, it's based upon the consent of the governed. So we need some sort of way to measure that consent, which for practical purposes is the ballot. People vote on it. So we see with the example of what happened in DC, what happens when people don't have faith in the fairness and the security of their elections. But regarding the roads, I'm not a pro-millage person. I've never been comfortable with new taxes. In fact, I voted every time against the 3. I'd continue to vote against the 3 because I felt that mechanism removed the consent of the people. So although I don't like new taxes, at least this allows them the say that they should have. I'm far more comfortable with that than us unilaterally levying a new millage. But if you can show me some place that came up with some solution that's at our disposal, bearing in mind we're talking literally tens of millions of dollars here. This is not a matter of if we order fewer paper clips. Believe me, I don't think that we should have government waste, but we're talking tens of millions of dollars here. I mean, I would love if some billionaire moved here and gave us the money or something like that, but that's less likely to happen. So we at least need to have these kind of ideas on the table. I think we're open to other ideas. And I don't mean that sarcastically. If anyone knows where we could get the tens of millions of dollars without looking at, I would prefer that. I don't like taxing people, and I think that's a grave responsibility. I lose sleep over the fact that we tax people and I'm involved in it. But I've never believed, because it's not true, the founders didn't think, John, I know you like to use the line, not to single you out, that all taxation is theft. It's not. We have a consent-based regime, and part of that is by being here, you consent that on some level you're going to be taxed. So yes, I think that 70% of people can tell the other 30% you have to be taxed. That's the regime that we have. Sorry.
Property and income tax. Those are two different, that's it.
The theory behind it is the same. You have a consent-based regime. And I... we could do this all day.
Offline.
We've had the discussion before, John. I don't hold it against you, and you don't hold it against me.
Any more comment?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Saw, sorry.
Penny, thank you. That was very kind. Eric, I just wanted to say thank you for investing in the sewer to tie to our lines, and glad that we approved it.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for coming tonight, Eric. Thank you for your service to the city, Eric. Put a lot of time in on for us as well.
Right, absolutely.
Any more council comment? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion on the floor to adjourn from Councilman Sharp, seconded by Councilman Briner. All in favor?
Aye.